Hello everyone, this is Yukie. In this video, we will talk about how DOT damage over time is calculated, break effect, and what are the best situations for each element to use their debuffs. In the last video, we explained 5 rules on how DOT is applied. Now let's talk about the characteristics of DOT and the debuff for each element. In Honkai Star Rail, the damage calculation and the debuff for each element are slightly different from one another, which makes it fun to try different DOT and break effects on different enemies. There are 2 types of DOT, break DOT and skill DOT. Break DOT is applied when an enemy breaks. There are 4 elements of DOT: physical, fire, lightning, and wind. While quantum, imaginary, and ice do not apply DOT but a type of debuff to the enemy. When an enemy breaks, it also receives a damage called break damage. This damage calculation is based on 3 factors: element multiplier, character level, and the target's maximum toughness. As you can see, it is mostly the same for all elements, except some elements have higher multipliers than others. Physical and fire are the highest, which are 2. Wind is 1.5. Ice and lightning are 1, while quantum and imaginary are 0.5. So physical and fire have the highest one-time break damage, followed by wind as the second highest. Another thing you need to note is that character level is actually the most important factor in this formula. The higher level you are, the higher break damage you will get. That is break damage. What about DOT damage? So DOT and debuffs are much more interesting. Although damage formula for DOT is a complicated calculation, we only need to know how base damage is calculated for each element because all the rest are the same. So all we need to look at is each element's base damage calculation and the effect of debuffs. Now let's talk about each element. First, fire burn, wind shear, and lightning shock are very similar. Lightning shock has a 2 times level multiplier, fire burn has a 1 time level multiplier, and wind has a slight advantage. It has a 1 time stack count times level multiplier because we can have extra stacks for wind element. When we fight elite enemies and bosses, it has up to 5 stacks of wind shear, so it makes it a better DOT element for elite enemies and bosses. Physical is another element that is good for bosses and elites, because its base damage is based on the maximum HP of the enemy. So if we really try to boost up the DOT damage for physical bleed, such as stacking break effect and percentage DEF reduction, the DOT damage for bleed could be 7% to 16% of the boss HP. Other than wind and physical that are good for boss fights, quantum is another one that might be good for boss fights if applied properly. Even though quantum debuff doesn't have a high multiplier, its damage also depends on the toughness of the enemy. So for elites and bosses, this can greatly increase its damage. Also, even though quantum entanglement debuff has only 1 layer and lasts only 1 turn, it can gain up to 5 stacks. Every time you attack the entangled enemy within 1 turn, it gains 1 stack. You may ask, what if I don't have enough time to apply those 5 stacks? Worry not. Another feature of quantum entanglement is delaying enemy action for an extra amount, which means when you break the enemy, after the enemy's action is delayed like every break effect, quantum entanglement will also delay its action for an extra amount, 20% times 1 plus break effect. So the enemy will need more time to do the next action, and you have more chance to gain extra stacks of entanglement. Another bonus from quantum entanglement is that because it takes longer for the enemy to recover from break, we have more chances to attack the enemy under break state. Thus, we can deal more damage. The similar concept works for imaginary's imprisonment as well. This debuff lasts only 1 turn and has no DOT damage. It will cause the enemy's action to be delayed for 30% times 1 plus break effect. This delay is longer than the extra delay from quantum entanglement. Not only does imprisonment add a delay, it also decreases the speed of the enemy by 10%. So the concept for imaginary imprisonment is to greatly delay the enemy's turn and make the break state last longer. It also helps to extend the time for the debuffs we added to the enemy, such as DEF reduction. So imaginary is more about indirect ways of dealing higher damage. It is especially good for teams with debuffers and high damage, high speed teams. And last but not least, Ice Debuff. The calculation for Ice Freeze is 1 times level multiplier. The break damage for Ice Freeze is not high. It is mostly used for the freeze debuff. When frozen, the enemy cannot act for this turn. However, upon unfreezing, the next turn action advances forward by 50%, even though this will make debuffs on the enemy disappear faster, which is not a good choice for debuffer teams. When the enemy unfreezes, it will still stay in the break state, which makes the break time longer and we can deal more damage. That's all for DOT and debuffs of every element in Honkai Star Rail. If you missed the first video about 5 DOT rules, you can check it out here. Thanks for watching and see you next video. 见嘞!